2020 came around. I had my daughter. March 2020, she was 6 months old. And by that point, it's like, okay, I'm not the primary food source anymore. I can start to maybe do some stuff. And I had decided I was going to start in-person classes. I think everyone can guess how that
Yeah.
went. And that was the catalyst for pivot to be like, well, no one wants to come see me in person. And I said, it's time to take everything that I learned over these past 6 months and bring my courses online. And so I did a few things for free online, just as like it's a pandemic, this sucks, let's all get together and take pictures. And then I ran my first launch. That first launch, I made $6,000 on it. The year before, in addition to my full-time job, I made $8,000. That was the most I'd ever made. So now I come in and I do this first launch and I make in a week almost what I made the whole previous year. And I'm like, whoa, hold on.
Oh. When I first started my wedding photography business back in 2011, I made just $5,000 in my business. Now, I bring in multiple six figures per year while working only 30-hour weeks serving my dream couples. I'm here to help you discover that it's so possible to have what you want when you want in your business so that you can create the life you've always dreamed of and deserve. Welcome back to another episode of the Shine and Thrive Photography Podcast. Hello there. I'm your host, Sarah Monica. I don't know why. Straight up, I just speak British sometimes when I'm nervous, but I also sometimes speak British just to make it fun. I don't know who else does that. I mean, one of my best friends, Natasha, we always have randomly just spoken British to each other, and now it just comes out in life, and that's just how it is. But I am so happy that you're here. Today's episode is something a little bit different because I'm chatting with a photographer that is in a whole nother niche that I haven't really even thought of consciously that often. I'm always thinking about wedding and portrait photography because that's just what I'm consistently surrounded with. That's what I specialize in, right? But Kristine Richer actually is a Nightscape and Deepscape photographer. She's also an incredible educator. Oh my God, her work is incredible. If you pause right now and just go to Kristine Rose Photography on Instagram, and her name starts with a K. So at Kristine Rose Photography. As I'm chatting and you're listening to this episode, you can just like understand what she does because her work is literally out of this world. It's literally out of this world because she documents things that our eyes cannot see in deep space. So this episode is actually so value packed. You don't even have to have an interest in nightscape or deepscape photography to get so much value out of it because we go into so much of her story and the beliefs that she had to dismantle along her journey in her career to get to what actually felt like success for her in her photography career. I know a lot of us, me included, have some stumbling blocks along the way or speed bumps where we feel like we're heading in a good direction and then we feel like something is missing, something is out of alignment with us. And maybe we're doing something just because we think we should or it's the only way. And so I related a lot to her story. And so I think it's so powerful for you to listen to her story about where she felt stuck, the limiting beliefs that were holding her back, and how she was able to overcome them and then now live a life and have a photography career that actually lights her up truly from the inside. We also chatted about the power of the why of what you do as a photographer and how it's linked to how confidently you show up and sell whatever you are selling, whether it's a service or actual like prints and art. It's so key to know your why. She also shares how she quit her full-time job in 2020 and she went all in with her photography business and took it to multiple six figures in 2021, literally in a year and a half. And it's going to be in a way that actually surprises you. So you're going to want to tune into that as well. And she shares about what she teaches in her Milky Way photography course, where she empowers her students to connect more to themselves and nature through shooting nightscapes and deepscapes. Now, I'm going to start the episode for you soon, but first I want to just introduce Kristine a little bit more properly to you because she just has such an incredible background. And I want to make sure you know exactly what her background is because it's it's key, it's important. So Kristine Richer is the owner of Kristine Rose Photography and runs the Night Photography Academy, where she teaches enthusiastic outdoor photographers how to create stunning images of the Milky Way. She has a Bachelor of Fine Arts and a Bachelor of Design from NSCAD University and spent over a decade as a commercial product photographer and designer. She started teaching photography at NSCAD University in 2008, and during the pandemic, she quit her full-time commercial photography job to instead run her own business as a full-time fine art photographer and educator. She has exhibited her images both locally and worldwide and has 2 of her images featured by, get this, NASA on the astronomy photo of the day. So incredible. So yeah, without further ado, enjoy my chat with Kristine. I'm sure it's going to just open up your mind to what is possible for you. Hey, Kristine, welcome to the Shine and Thrive Photography Podcast. So excited you're here. I can't wait to dive in. Like, we have so much to talk about, and I'm literally like nerding out already on everything that we're going to chat about.
I'm so excited. Thank you for having me, Sarah.
Of course. And okay, so first, I think it's so valuable that we dive into a bit of your story because there's so much to your story of like what you went through, the decisions you made along the way, from fear and also not fear and limiting beliefs and also realizing what's actually possible for you. So I would love to know, tell us a little bit about your journey of how you went from, the thinking that you can't be an artist and make money to actually following what you really wanted to do and be successful at it.
Yeah, such a great thing to talk about and dive into. And you're right, there's a lot here. I would say that all of this is coming from limiting beliefs that came from how I grew up. I grew up in rural Nova Scotia in a place that's very resource based and didn't have a lot of money. And the idea of being an artist was like, oh, you want to be a starving artist? You want to live on ramen noodles for the rest of your life? Like that is ingrained from a very young age, especially when you live very, very rurally. And I made the kind of crazy decision in high school. I was top of my class, honors with distinction, all of that stuff. And I said, no, I'm going to only apply to art school. And fortunately, my parents were like, yeah, do it. You can do whatever you want. So I did. And I went into NSCAD University. So that's the Nova Scotia College of Art and Design. In Ontario, you guys have the OCAD University. And I did 5 years and 2 degrees. I did a Bachelor of Fine Arts with a major in photography and a Bachelor of Design with a concentration in product design. I came out of art university being like, this is amazing. I have so much clarity on why I'm creating. I was really confident in the act of creation. And I was also very confident that being an artist was a bad idea, that I would have to live off of government grants, that there was no way I could make any money. And I basically dove into what I call corporate creative for the next 11 years. And right out of university, I got a job working, amazing job, like absolutely props to the place that I was in. It was a toy company and I ran the photography studio and was photographing every day. And I also was a product designer. And so I had so many opportunities and so much growth. And I stayed there because in my head, if I left that job, I would be a starving artist. I would not be able to make money. And that kept me at the job longer than I think I would have been at if I had not had these limiting beliefs.
Right. And what were those little like pings of like intuitive hits of like, I don't feel fully fulfilled here, but I'm going to ignore them. Like, how long were they there for? And like, what did they feel like?
Yeah. So I would say that for the duration of working there, I always had other jobs. I started teaching actually in 2008. I started teaching at NSCAD University, teaching photography. And then I also did pretty much every side hustle of photography that you can imagine. So I did corporate, I did headshots, I did industrial. I did wedding, which then leads into newborns and family. I was a pet photographer for a while, which I actually still love. Like, give me like a dog underneath the Milky Way. And I'm like, heck yes. And so I was always working. I was working for that time period in my life. I worked 60 to 70 hours a week, every week. That was just it. And I loved my full-time job. I loved the people who were there, my art director. They pushed me, they made me a better photographer. But there was also this piece of it that, we were making toys, consumable toys that brought a lot of joy to kids, but they also were in landfills, a couple months, less than a year later. And my background, feel very connected to nature, and I have a strong background in environmentalism. And there was just these feelings of like, this doesn't mesh up with what I actually feel inside. And so I would say close to when I got pregnant with my son. So my son was born in May of 2016. So in 2015 would have been when I was starting to feel this. And the birth of my son was absolutely the catalyst for actually figuring this out, for being like, whoa, I now have a small person who's dependent on me. And what am I showing them if I stay here? And so that was certainly the start of when I started to really look at what is it that I am using my finite energy every day to put towards, and what is that putting out into the world?
I love that. So, oh my gosh. The first thing that comes to mind is once you then had that realization that, oh my gosh, some things need to shift in my life.
Mm-hmm.
What are some like questions you started asking yourself that gave you the answers you were looking for? Because clearly for you to make those changes, you had to do things differently and become someone else. So like, how did you figure out the next steps for you in discovering what was that thing, that path that was going to fulfill you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was very fortunate to come across this woman. Her name was Emily King, and she runs this coaching business called The Rich Woman. And she was coming to do an event at a space that a friend of mine owned. So I came to it, and she started talking about these things called limiting beliefs. And previous to this, nothing.
Yeah.
Like I was like, what are limiting beliefs? And so I went through this workshop with her, and I was like, this is amazing. So I signed up for a group coaching program with her. I've never done this before in my life at this point. I had done no personal development, nothing like that. I was like, you go to university and then you get a job. That's what life is, right? Like there's nothing else after that. Yeah. So anyways,
So
how little did I know?
more, yeah.
And so I remember it very clearly. I had got my son down to bed, and I took my dog Jazz out for a walk, just this little park that was near our house called Kenneth Walker Park, teensy tiny little park. And I had her in my headphones, and I was listening to one of the modules in the course, and she starts talking about money beliefs. And I was like, what do money beliefs mean? Like, I don't, it's money. Money is money. And then she goes through and she's like, have you ever had the thought you have to work hard for your money, or that money doesn't grow on trees? And I was like, well, yeah, money doesn't go on trees, obviously. And yeah, you have to work hard for your money. How else are you going to do it? And then she started dismantling those. And I swear my mind exploded. I listened to that over and over. I was sitting by this point, my dog was laying down being like, what are you doing? And I was sitting on one of the kids' swings, like swinging back and forth, listening to this, being like, my gosh, my world is like, so that was really the catalyst for then just diving into all of this and learning that all of the things that I thought were true were not actually true. And then that just was like a domino effect in my life.
Oh my gosh. So then, okay, everything that you're saying is so, I know exactly what you mean. That moment in life where I discovered, oh, limiting beliefs, right? It's like this whole, like you just said, your mind exploded. This whole new world opened up to you of possibility. And I actually love how you said that you had this moment of when you were doing the commercial photography, you were photographing toys, but then you're like, but wait, what am I contributing to the world? I am actually helping sell these toys that then end up in landfills. And it's like, oh my gosh, I actually had that same kind of realization, but a little bit sooner when I was finishing up college for photography. And I was like, I'm going to be a fashion photographer. Like that was what I was going to do. That's the portfolio I had created and built. because I had the limiting belief that the only genre of photography you could be fully free and creative in was in fashion, because you could do weird things with like
Oh,
looks and lighting and whatever. So I never even
yeah.
considered like weddings or portraits. And then this amazing photographer that I ended up working for a bit, Story Wilkins, came in and presented her wedding photography, which was very like moment and emotion centered. And I
Hmm.
had never seen wedding photography in that light. I had only seen it at like really, really posy and like emotionless. And in that moment, that one class, that one presentation that she did, my whole world flipped upside down. And I'm like, oh my God, like fashion photography, it's like, it like, what does it really contribute to the world? But
Yeah.
like looking at these images, this contributes to people, their family history, them remembering how loved they were, all these things. And in that one class, I had to, it was a month left until graduation. I had to make the
Gosh.
decision to literally X all the work that I did on my fashion portfolio and then restart my portfolio and just create portraits and somehow find a wedding to second shoot and all of that. So
Oh
it's
my
funny because
gosh.
I also had that kind of realization of like, what do I really want to do for the world? How do I want to impact?
Mm.
And that helped
Hmm.
me take me on the path that felt so aligned with my soul and what I wanted. So I love
Hmm.
hearing how you also had that kind of like nudge, right? And realization. And so now I'm curious, like, how the heck did you even dive into and discover like documenting nightscapes and deepscapes and following that path as a photographer?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So that also came from my son. So previous to this, I had done all types of photography to get paid, and I enjoyed all of it. And I was good at all of it, but I wouldn't say that my heart was in it. The thing that I loved doing was going out hiking with my dog. So, like, we would just go hiking and I would shoot and we would hang out past sunset and just take all kinds of shots. But then I had my son, and I don't know how this worked because the time of sunset changes through the year, but it didn't matter. He was going to bed at sunset and I was breastfeeding him. And I was looking out the window and being like, wouldn't it be nice to take pictures right now? And I couldn't. And there are a lot of that, my creativity is bound up with my identity. And I started to lose that piece of myself. And that's very difficult when you're in this phase being a new mother and you're trying to figure out now, who am I? So I had this crazy thought. I was like, okay, I'm not sleeping anyways. So why don't I get a little bit less sleep and I'll just go out at night and take landscape pictures at night? And that's really how it started. And I will say my first photos, they don't even have like what we would classically call the Milky Way in them. They're just pictures at night of stars. And then I started to do this and I started to realize, oh, this is a challenge, which I personally really love. I love getting technical. I love figuring stuff out. So I dove headfirst into that. And then I started posting my images. And I will say I got a lot of dopamine hits from all the people who are like,
Yeah.
this is amazing. And I was like, yeah, it is, isn't it? I really like this. I'm tired, but this is fun. And that's really how it started. And it even went to the point because I went back after I had my son, I went back to work. I didn't go back full time. I stayed 1 to 2 days a week home with my son. But if I came in the morning at work and I was really tired, I worked with, there's a lot of younger people there, and they were probably out drinking the night before. With me, my art director, she's like, oh, it was a clear night last night. You were out shooting. I was like, yeah, I was out shooting until 3 a.m. That's why I'm here
That's
and I'm
so
tired.
funny.
And so that's really, and if I look back, I can see pieces of this. I grew up in rural Nova Scotia. I had the advantage of going out every night and seeing big, beautiful stars overhead. I spent a lot of time outside. There were these little nudges and things in university. I remember the first time that I saw a night photo, but it looked like a daytime photo, and it was in a view camera class. So it was, we were shooting with these huge cameras, so 4x5 negatives and printing them. And this one student puts it up and I'm like, this is a weird photo. Like, what's going on in this picture? Because it was like a 30-minute image taken at night, but it looked like daytime, but it had stars. And I remember my mind was blown. I was like, I didn't know you could do that. So there's all these little pieces that I can see in the past that contributed to, once I started doing this, I just couldn't stop. It was just so exciting. And it didn't matter how tired I got, because that's being a mom, is just being tired. So
Yeah. Oh my
yeah.
gosh. And And so this is what's so beautiful of listening to stories of like your story, for example, because now we can choose to see and hear your story from an outside perspective and see what happened
Mm,
along the way. And all I'm seeing is you followed your curiosity, you followed what got you excited, you followed
yeah.
what lit you up and made everything about photography feel so fun for you that you literally couldn't help it. That you literally, even as a new mom, would just stay up longer at night. Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's like, if
Exactly.
you like, for those of you listening, if you have those nudges, listen to those. And
Mm.
as long as you listen to those, I promise you, you will end up on the path that you're meant to, and you will be able to find success. And now I'm just so excited to dive into chatting more about, because Kristine, actually, you were able to quit your full-time job in 2020.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you went full time with your photography business and mainly started diving into education. But from
Mhm.
2020 to the end of 2021, you were able to take your business to multiple six figures, following that dream and following that curiosity. So tell us more about that journey and what you learned along the way and how you were able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I knew after I had my son and I went back to my full time job, I knew that my heart wasn't in that anymore. But I also still had these like, well, I have a kid. I can't just quit my job. He needs to eat. Like, we need a house. But I started listening to this guy, James, on this podcast called the Mind Your Business podcast. And I really resonated with the types of things they said. So when I was going on to maternity leave with my daughter, it was in August of 2019. It was also coincided with the Business by Design launch that James ran. And I was like, I don't know, I'm 36 weeks pregnant. This is crazy, but I'm just going to sign up. So I did. I signed up. And I like to say that most people, like on maternity leave, especially for those of us here in Canada who actually get a maternity leave, they like to binge watch Gilmore Girls or something like that. I binge watched Business by Design. And I was, up in the middle of the night feeds, listening to how to run a launch, listening to how to create an offer, listening to how to do my messaging. And I lived and breathed that once, but I would like to say I lived and breathed it, but I didn't quite yet believe it,
Mm,
because when 2020 came around, I had my daughter March 2020. She was 6 months old. And by that point, it's like, okay, baby can start eating food. I can start to I'm not the primary food source anymore. I can start to maybe do some stuff. And I had decided I was going to start in-person classes in March of 2020. And so I think everyone can guess how that
yeah.
went. It did not go. And that was the catalyst for Pivot to be like, well, no one wants to come see me in person, because I did my classes here in my home. And I said, it's time to take everything that I learned over these past 6 months and bring my courses online. And I had already done Milky Way photography courses in person previously before I had my daughter. And so I did a few things for free online, just as it's a pandemic, this sucks, let's all get together and take pictures. And then I ran my first launch in May of 2020. And it was that first launch, I made $6,000 on it. I would like to say, to preface, the year before, just like teaching photography on the side, having some small gigs here, in addition to my full-time job, I made $8,000. That was the most I'd ever made. So you can kind of see how I had always been working really hard and doing lots of stuff. And, my full-time job, I was a great salary, so it was fine. I made 60, 70,000 a year. So I didn't need the money from the photography, but I wasn't necessarily treating it like a business. So now I come in and I do this first launch, and I make in a week almost what I made the whole previous year. And I'm like, oh, hold on.
Oh, yeah.
So I did that launch, and it was difficult. It was really difficult. I will say that. I was home full time with my son, who was 4 years old, my daughter, who was 6 months old. I would be up creating the content until 2 a.m. when my daughter would wake up to feed. And then I would feed my daughter, and then I'd sleep for a couple hours before I got up with the kids. So that particular time in my life was very full and very difficult, but it also showed me this is possible. I can do this. People want to buy my course online. I had people from Texas, I had people from the UK, and I had all of these people coming in and getting excited about Milky Way photography. which is such a super specific niche,
Very specific,
like crazy
yeah.
specific. Yeah. So the first year, 2020, from May 2020 to the end, I did 45,000 in launching. And I decided after I did that first launch, I did one more. I said to my husband, look, I want to quit my full-time job. Like I don't want to go back there. It's a pandemic. I want the kids to be able to be home if they have to be. I want to be here and I think I can make this work. And we were just like, I'm going to do one more launch. Let's see how it does.
And
if
when
it
was
does,
that?
That was in July. So I did
July
another launch
of
in July 2020.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Because my maternity leave was up in August.
Okay.
So I did the launch in July and it made 10,000. And I was like, well, that's better than the last one. We're doing it. We're going all in. And, I have to give props to my husband because I had spent the last decade with him. He had been with me through all of this and doing all of this work, working really hard, not really making a ton of money. And he was like, all right. He's like, we're going to give it a year. I trust you. Let's go. And so I put in my notice. I said, I'm not coming back. And I went full into this, into teaching. And one of the things that James talks about is building a bridge, is focusing, getting laser focused on one thing first. And so I said to myself, I'm going to teach this one thing. I am going to teach it and I'm going to teach it again and again and again and again. And that's what I did. And it just kept growing every time that I did it. So from May 2020 to the end of the year, I did 45,000. And then this past year, I finished at 290,000, which is just mind-boggling is what it is.
So impressed and like so grateful for you to share that so openly as well. Because again, as I always say on this podcast, numbers are so important to share in the community because then we know what's possible for everybody else. And I just find, and also just showing that you making that decision, even though it was scary, right? Of course,
you're fine.
Like so many fears. You have 2 kids, like so much fear could have popped up and stopped you. Mm-hmm. But you kind of like knew that if you just let that go, that thing that wasn't serving you anymore, you could put all of your energy and focus into what you really wanted to do. And then look what you were able to do and accomplish with that extra time, right? Time is our most valuable asset. So oh my gosh, thank you for sharing that. And it's so impressive.
Thank you.
And okay, so I'm trying to think where else we can, I'm really excited to also talk about, your Milky Way photography and then your course as well. And maybe tell us a little bit about, actually, this is where my intuition is kind of leading us. So can you tell everyone about maybe one of the hardest limiting beliefs you felt like you had to dismantle? Like, what was the one that maybe had the most resistance for you and how you went about moving through and like becoming that person that believes it?
Yeah, I can definitely speak to that because I'm still in it. So it's the biggest one that's been there for the duration of my life, that you can't make money as an artist. And you'll see with the way that I structured my business and the way that I took the leap into teaching because I had been teaching. So I started teaching actually before I even finished my university degrees. The university had hired me to teach. So I started teaching in 2008. So when I quit my full-time job, I went whole hog into teaching because I still believed that was the way to make money. That was the only way available to me to make money. And I still, at that point, I don't think I would have called myself an artist. Today, if I introduce myself to someone, I will say I'm an artist. I'm an artist and an educator. And I know a lot of photographers don't necessarily think of themselves that way. And I definitely didn't. I was like, no, I'm a photographer. I'm an educator. Artists don't make money. My work inherently doesn't have value to be for someone else to pay and put up on their walls. And that was the biggest one that I had to work through. And this last year, my focus was, okay, get my education, get that completely taken care of. So I want to make sure that I am serving all of these amazing students who are coming in and working with me. I want to make sure that my courses are amazing, that they're getting results. And then my intuition was like, okay, Kristine, like you've got this. This is working really well. Your students are doing amazing. They're creating work that's just fantastic. You need to now own up to this. Like you need to now say to the world, I am an artist. I am someone who has something to say that is inherently valuable. And it's not wrong for me to sell my work, to put a price tag, to put a value on my work for someone else to own it. And that was a really huge shift. And I would also like to say it's something that resonates a lot with my audience. And so I'm very open with that with them. And I talk about it. And, I bought, I have a really big printer behind me here that Sarah can see on our video together. I bought that because I live in very rural Nova Scotia. It's difficult to print here. I have to at least send stuff to Toronto. If not, like the place that actually prints the stuff that I want is in BC. It takes high turnaround times to get stuff. So I made the investment. I said, I'm going to invest in this piece of equipment that's going to let me take full control over what I'm creating. And I went live with that whole process with my students. And then I started putting it out there and saying, here's my work. Here's my art. These are the pieces I want to sell. This is why I think you should have them. This is the connection I think my art brings. And that was a huge, huge one for me. And I'm still have to work through it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I love that you mentioned that. And especially that you're in it too, because it could be also be something really vulnerable to share when you're actually still in it. But I think it's just so raw and real. And I freaking love that about you. And okay, so can you walk us through then right now as you're in it and you're starting to sell your art, what are your results so far looking like? Like how, just to give like a sense of like how much a photographer can actually sell their art for, like where have you started to kind of charge as for your commissions? And also maybe explain, I love that you said you explain the why behind the value that your images offer, because I think that a lot of the time, like you're saying that artists are scared to sell their art because they don't maybe see value in it. It's because we as artists are part of the creation process and we know how easy maybe it was for us to create at one point because we have that natural or that talent that we worked to have, but also that intuitive feeling of like, oh, I'm going to like go here and create it this way. And then for us, it's like, well, it was kind of easy for me to create because I just really love doing this. Right. So it's like, how can I sell this even for $5,000, $10,000? I don't know how people would find value in it. So I know that could be like a block. Right. But yeah, tell us maybe how you now communicate the why and the value, and then where you're at with figuring out how to price your art to sell.
Yeah, absolutely. So at the moment, I have my business model for selling my work is limited edition prints. And my work starts at between 1,200 and 1,500 per piece. And I'll do 15 within that edition. Now, I say that it's evolving and will likely change over time. Last year, of the 290,000 that my business did, 25,000 of that was in print sales. And that was just kind of starting to say, okay, this is where I'm at. My plan is to take that to six figures this year. So that's my goal for selling my art this year. And I have a few ways that I'm doing that. Now I'm signed up for a couple courses with people who know more about this than I do, who have been living in this world. Because one of the ways to fast track your success is to go to someone who's doing it, who knows. I wouldn't have taken my education business where it was if I didn't sign up for Business by Design. Straight up, I wouldn't have. So I'm working with a few mentors to help me see things that I don't see, and also to help me understand the world of collectors. The other thing that I'm doing in the vein of selling is I also have on my vision board to start showing with galleries. And it's very interesting because there's one particular gallery locally that I feel is well suited to my work. So I started last year just interacting with their content. So that's it. I followed them on social media. I commented, I interacted. And just last week, they sent me a message and they said, hey, I don't know if you're interested in showing your work, if that's something that you do, but I absolutely love your work and we'd love to talk to you.
Oh my
And I was
gosh,
just like,
yes.
yes,
Oh,
of course.
you
Like inside, I'm
did.
like, holy, yeah.
That's amazing.
And I had been planning to reach out to them later on this year when I
Yeah.
felt like I had my stuff together.
Yeah.
And instead, here I get this message coming in from them. So I have a meeting set up with them next week. And, that's being intentional about the things that you're doing and having that vision, I think can be really helpful. So all of that in terms of where it's at right now, that's where it is. And it's going to grow even more this year. I think the second part that you're asking about with this idea of like, why, that is something that runs through everything that I do. And I think it's really important as an artist to sit down, artist, photographer, whatever it is that you identify with, to sit down and understand your why. This is one of the things that I harp this into my students. They hear me say this all the time, is to figure out your why. And my litmus test here is if your why can be applicable to someone else, it is not your why. So if I say, oh, I take pictures of the night stars because they're inspiring to me and I feel connected to the universe. Well, there's like a dozen other people I could walk down the street and they would say the same thing. So that's not actually what my why is. So going deeper with that, because when you really understand the reason behind the creation, then you can understand why someone else would be receptive to that. And so that for me, I found was a really, really big piece of the puzzle.
Oh my gosh, I love that you said that because I teach that exact same thing in my little marketing course that I have, my CCM course. I specifically teach portrait and wedding photographers how to unearth their why. And it's so funny because whenever I ask portrait wedding photographers just in a coaching call or like just chatting, so why are you a wedding photographer? It's like always the surface level, because I love capturing moments for people so they have them to remember. And it's always that. But then when you just keep going deeper, 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 and I have this exercise in there, it's like, then when they finally realize how specific they can be and what really is firing them up to be that photographer, it's like mind blowing, right? So I love that you are so passionate about teaching your students that as well, because that's where you build that strong foundation in your business to then know exactly how to message yourself, how to show up, how to market, how to end up selling the thing that you are offering. So that is so powerful. So what is your why with selling
so
your images?
my why definitely does come from connection. So for me, in my past, I had a lot of hardships growing up, and nature was my refuge. So being outside was really the thing that was consistent for me. So I could always just step outside and be in nature and be able to be at peace. And taking that a step further, when you're outside at night, and I was able to just look up at the sky, and you start to feel this perspective when you're out there. And it starts all of the things, whatever was going on. And so, growing up, we had a lot of hardship. I could go out and I could look up at the stars, and you could start to think about all of the possibility that existed. And all of a sudden, things didn't feel so bad anymore. And, last year was one of the most difficult years of my life. My mother passed away unexpectedly. My father, just a few months later, fell off scaffolding, almost died. It was a really long process for him to get back up and running. And, that's really, it was difficult. Personally, it was very difficult. And I would go out and be under the stars. And that is the refuge. That is the thing, that connection between the stars and between Earth, and that feeling that you get and the thoughts of comfort that come from that are really the why for me. And I see it with so many people. We, in my community, we call it star therapy. So going out under the stars is our star therapy. So many people have a version of that as well. And further that, if we come back to this idea of art and why would people put stuff up on their wall? Well, who wouldn't want to have that type of connection in their home? And so that thought process going from, hey, what's my why, to, well, okay, that's actually a pretty big deal. It's like it
Yeah.
does quite a lot for me.
Yeah.
So why would I not put value on that for someone else as well?
And as you were saying those things, right? I'm feeling emotions, right? As you're sharing your why
Mm,
with me, that actually those emotions then make me feel even more connected to your art because it's already
mhm.
so beautiful. It's like there's like different levels because like I could look at one of your photos and be like, oh my gosh, that's our planet. That's so beautiful. But then it's like on
Mhm.
top of that, you as the artist created that and
Yeah.
the reason why. And then I look at that and then I'm like, I want one of her pieces so I can hang it up on my wall in my office and always look up and see the possibility that is
Yeah.
available to me. Maybe that's how I would interpret it. Right. But it does add, again, people buy through emotion, through feeling, through the experience that they're going to
Yeah.
have as well. So, yeah, you just adding that totally makes me think less of even the price tag. And then on top of for you as the artist, when you know your why so clearly, you like, don't you feel so much more confident to actually
Mm.
sell your art?
Yeah,
It's like a
absolutely.
beautiful like circle. It's
It
all
all works in
connected.
together. Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say though that it's very vulnerable
Mm.
because you start speaking about this, you start writing about it. And I like the piece that you said there, how, you look at my work and now that you've heard that, you feel more connected to it. That's exactly what happens. And it's this beautiful thing and it grows onto itself. And it's also really, really vulnerable.
Yeah.
Like as an artist, as a photographer, to be like, hey, I had these struggles or hey, I have these feelings or these thoughts, and that's how it impacts this work. And then you put it out there in the world for everyone to think whatever it is they want to think about it. That's a little bit terrifying, and very, very vulnerable to do. Yeah.
Yeah. But so actually, I'm curious, how do you feel that you overcame that initial fear of being so vulnerable?
I
Or is it
found
like a constant practice?
Mm, a little bit of a constant. It's a lot better now because I have a community of people who are just amazing and wonderful. But I definitely found in the beginning, when I first started putting my work out there, it was more like, oh, I had this really cool night out shooting last night. Like that's what I would attach. That's what I would put as my captions and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then I kind of started being like, well, but it's more than that. And I think it came from seeing people who were being a little bit more vulnerable and myself personally connecting and thinking to myself, you know what? We need more of that. We need less of this surface level that social media tends to be, and we need more of the actual deep connection. And a large part of that was being like, well, F the people who don't like it.
Yeah.
It was like, I am not here to make friends with tens of thousands of people who just care about an epic adventure that I had
Mhm.
last night. I'm much more interested in having a deeper conversation with the people that will resonate with what I'm talking about. And that leads into like the why of my business, which is to be a person who inspires and who helps people on their journey to being creative, to connecting with nature. And I can't do that if I'm keeping things at a surface level. So when I started to really also understand the why that I'm teaching, the why I have my business, that then led into being like, well, there's no, like, you're not going to show up here as a surface level and just inflict any type of or impact any type of change. So a lot of that came hand in hand together. And at a certain point too, I also found I was like, I just, after having kids and being a mom and just hanging out with kids all day, I'm like, I don't, all the other stuff, I'm not even going to worry about it anymore. People will like it or they won't like it. And if they
Mm.
don't, they can just go away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing I
Yeah.
one way I love to think to help me through that kind of thing is that kind of fear is no matter what I do, people will love me because
Mm,
whatever action you take or however you show up, there will be people that either love it or hate it or are indifferent to it. Every single thing you do. So if I always just think, well, no matter what I do, I will have positive judgments and people will love me for it and people will feel inspired by it, then it's like I can literally do whatever, whenever, and there will always
mm.
somehow be a positive impact, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
helps me along the
Absolutely.
way. And it's actually funny because you saying that you kind of hit this point where you're like, well, I don't feel like I want to show up just surface level anymore,
Mm,
because you're like, what impact am I having on the world? I feel like it's like your second moment. It reminds me of the first moment
yeah.
that you had with the commercial photography and the toys. It's like, well,
Yeah.
how is this really impacting the world? And so
Yeah.
now it's like another moment like that on your journey where it's like, well, how can I have the impact that I actually want to have? And then you're making that little change. So it's
Hmm.
really cool. Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that. And
Yeah.
I really am so excited to also just hear a little bit more. And I'm sure the listeners are so excited to hear about your Milky Way photography course and what they can learn. And yeah, tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Milky Way photography is a very specific genre, and it's a very technical genre. There are a lot of pieces that you don't have to think about in any other type of photography. So, in terms of the course, I mean, the course is the step by step process to do everything. I have what I call my 4 keys of Milky Way photography: to focus, compose, and expose, and then light. And I go through each of those steps, which is the actual like technical. Here are the pieces. Here is how you focus your lens. Here is the exposure that you have to use based on the focal length that you're shooting at. One of the things that we don't necessarily think about is that the Earth is moving and we are photographing something that's not on the Earth. So what setting becomes the most important in night photography? It's your shutter speed. And there's actually there's multiple ways to do this, but there's something we call the 500 rule. And you take 500 and you divide your focal length into it. That's the longest shutter speed you can use before your stars start to become a star
Wow,
trail.
so fascinating.
Um, Now there's a lot more in depth into that, but
Yeah.
there's all of these technical pieces, and then there's pieces people don't even think about. Like I used to think, and this some people are going to laugh at me because they're going to know way better, and other people will be like, "Yeah, that was me." But like at night, the moon rises in the east, and then in the morning it sets in the west, and that's just like every night the moon rises, sets. No, it doesn't. There are moon cycles. There's the new moon versus the full moon cycle. The moon is rising, setting in the east and the west, respectively, ish, but at different times. And the moon is actually like the biggest enemy. You don't go out when the moon is out. So you go out shooting when there's no moon. You go during the new moon cycle. But then you also have to know where the Milky Way is in the sky, because people would be like, I get this. I get this, especially when I'm running ads for my classes. People are like, we're in the Milky Way. And I'm like, yes, we are in the Milky Way. However, in order to see what's called the Milky Way core, it's at specific times of year, in a specific direction, in a specific place. So you kind of have to become an amateur astronomer in
Mhm.
addition to knowing all of the technical pieces, then in addition to making a composition that actually says what you want to say. And you have to do it in a place where there's not light pollution.
Yeah.
So, like, Sarah, you're not going to go out and take a picture of the Milky Way in downtown Toronto. Just not going to happen.
No.
In fact, you have to drive pretty far to get somewhere. So, all of those pieces come into play. And it's really exciting. People, they say to me, they're like, Kristine, when I saw my first picture come up on the back of my camera, I did a literal happy dance, like in the middle
Oh,
of nowhere, in the middle of the night. And I just was so excited because it's really exciting. Our cameras can capture what we can't see with our eyes. We can
mm,
start to see it. You get outside, you stay somewhere dark, you don't look at any light. So, like, not your watch, not your phone, zero light for at least 20 minutes. You're going to start to be able to see more in the sky, but our cameras can see so much better than us.
mhm.
And it's mind blowing. I take thousands of students each year through my free training, which is called Your First Milky Way Photo. I'm very good at naming things.
No, it's amazing. I love
Um,
it.
and they go out and they get their first photo and they're like, oh my goodness, I'm hooked. And I'm like, well, welcome to now you're an amateur astronomer. You
Yeah.
also are a meteorologist because you're going to be complaining about clouds now. And you live your life by the moon cycle. So welcome to my world.
Yeah. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. That's amazing. Just like, it's okay. So where I'm like literally at a loss for words because all of that I was like so intrigued and just like learning more and listening more.
Mm.
So where can everybody connect with you to find your course, sign up for your course, and also connect with you outside of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm most active on Facebook and Instagram. So you'll find me at Kristine Rose Photography. Kristine is with a K. You can also find, I'm running my first course of the year. So your first Milky Way course. It's going to be happening on February the 24th, March 1st, and March 3rd. So you can get signed up for that. It's KristineRosePhotography.com/your first Milky Way photo. But if you follow me on Instagram or Facebook, et cetera, I talk about it a lot because I get really excited. So you'll see it pop up on there as well.
That's amazing. And it'll be linked in the show notes as well for you all. But yeah, just in case someone was like, wait, what was the website again? Just like say it again for them.
Yeah. With a K, KristineRosePhotography.com/your first Milky Way photo.
Perfect. Oh my gosh. Amazing. Well, thank you, Kristine, for just this amazing conversation. We like dove into so much into your journey, dismantling limiting beliefs on your journey that then led you to like literally quantum leaping in your life and business.
Yeah.
So you're just such an inspiration. I'm so grateful that you took the time to come hang out here, give all this value to my listeners. So thank you so much. This was so much fun.
Thank you for having me, Sarah. It was absolutely wonderful.
Yay! Thank you so much for hanging out with me and tuning into this episode. If you got value out of it, please feel free to message me on Instagram at Sarah Monica Photo. That's Sarah no H, Monica with a K photo, to let me know. I get so freaking energized hearing from others that what I've said has had a positive impact on their lives. Also, make sure to hit subscribe to the Shine and Thrive podcast to never miss an episode. I'm so grateful for you, and I'm sending you all the productive vibes your way so you have the best week ever.